All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another Environment and Power event. This is Sinking Cities, Miami and Malibu. My name is Lucy, and this is my brother, Asher. We'd also love to introduce Zach Pelk. Zach, can you give us a wave? There he is. Zach is joining the E&P team. So we are very excited to see everyone here. There's a lot of us, which is great. This is a very important topic to us, and it's very consequential for our community. So because there are so many of us tonight, which is just amazing, we just want to make sure that everyone's keeping their remarks brief so that we can hear a lot of voices.
Before we start the movie, we want to first acknowledge the land that we're on. Indigenous peoples today and all of their family and ancestors before them have always lived here on the land where our country is built. The Chumash and Miconacon peoples are the traditional stewards of the land where we live. While you watch the movie, we want to give you something to think about. So I want to start by saying, raise your hand if, for the people that are on camera, or you can do it in the reactions too. Raise your hand if you know well the story of Pesach, of Passover. I think it's probably most of us, I would say, yeah. So that's looks like a lot of us. I know a lot about the story of Passover too, but there was something that I didn't actually know that my mom, Chaplain Jennifer and I over there, that she actually taught me recently. So I'm going to teach it. As the Israelites approached the Red Sea, we know the story, and Pharaoh was behind them. They were at the Red Sea. Moses and the Israelites started praying. It seems reasonable. The Midrash, which is the commentary on our Jewish stories, says that a voice from heaven said to Moses, "It is not the time to pray now. While you are in trouble, you must act." God said to the people when they were in trouble at the Red Sea, it's not the time to pray, it's the time to act. So Judaism can be both about praying and also about acting, but in times of crisis, we need to act.
Thank you. Before we get to the movie, we just want to do a little bit of tech here. So as Asher asked earlier for you to raise your hands, feel free to raise your hand physically, or if you're able to, you'll see on the bottom right of your screen, there's a little smiley face with a plus. And if you click on that, you'll see that there is a raise hand button there. People can try it out if you want to. I'll show you. That's a screen share raising its hand now. But so that will give you the ability to raise your hand virtually, and it'll let us see that you want to be called on. So please do that if you can. And if you're not able to, just physically raise your hand. Yeah, and again, please just keep yourself muted unless we call on you to speak, just so that we can all stay organized and we can hear everyone's voices. So we know that there's going to be a lot to discuss and a lot of thoughts. Unfortunately, we probably won't have time to hear from everyone on every question. So if you don't get the chance to speak, we really encourage you to use the chat if you're comfortable. And that's down at the bottom of your screen as well. You can click that and then you can type in the chat. And that will allow you to continue the conversation in the chat itself. So we wanted to start with a few opening questions, just generally what is important to you. So would anyone, just a few people, like to share? What do you care about when it comes to America's coastlines? What do you want them to look like? What do you value about beaches, about beach communities?
You can take a moment and write in the chat if you want, or if you have an idea, you can raise your hand and you can start that off.
Judy, is that a hand?
Yes, yes, it is. I wanted to say that I have always felt blessed, because I'm a beachy kind of person, to have our beautiful beaches and coastline on both coasts, because I'm originally from the East Coast and I love beaches wherever I go. So my thought would be, let that be preserved so that future generations can enjoy it as much as I have. Thank you.
Yeah,
Exactly. Thank you.
Jerry, is that a hand?
Oh, let's look at the chat.
I can't tell.
Yes. Oh, yes. Bron said wildlife. Completely. I completely agree. Such something that's so beautiful about going to the beach is getting to see the animals and the plants and all of the, and in your different parts of the world too. There's coral and yeah.
and mom said, Jennifer said it's free. For anyone who doesn't know, Chaplain Jennifer is also our mom. So if we call her mom, that's what's going on. But yes, anyone who wants to can visit the ocean. Actually, in California, the beach is declared a right of everyone. So legally, everyone owns the beach basically, which I think is really interesting. All right, so I think we should get the movie started now. All right, welcome back, everyone. Give everyone a minute to come back, turn on their cameras if they want to. All right, well, we hope you found Sinking Cities Miami interesting. There are a bunch, I think there are 4 of these. So if you're interested in learning more about other cities that are sinking and dealing with these issues of the rising sea levels, then there are more. They're free to watch on PBS, so I highly recommend doing that. But I bet that you guys have a lot of thoughts and a lot of feelings, certainly quite a lot of information. So we do want to talk about this movie, and again, we have a lot to talk about in sort of a limited amount of time. So we are hoping to hear a lot of different voices tonight. So please keep your responses brief and use your best judgment as to whether you're adding to the conversation still instead of repeating it. We're going to put some questions in the chat. These. Just so you can reference that if you'd like to, see what we're going to be asking. But our first question is basically if anyone would like to share their initial thoughts, what stood out to you, or in general, if you have any questions, if anything surprised you about the viewing. And again, feel free to raise your hand physically or with the raise hand function. Oh, Larry?
Oh,
you're muted.
There we go.
There you go.
You know, I mean, to me, they're taking a Band-Aid approach. I mean, yes, they're trying to mitigate the problem, but I mean, we all know that the real problem is global warming. And, you know, the hurricanes are affected by global warming. Antarctica is receding and the glaciers, I heard a statistic and I can't even remember, if some of the large not glaciers, but the ice fields in Antarctica melt, there's a 1 foot rise in the ocean overall. Lori and I have been in Venice when it flooded and water was 1.5 to 2 feet deep. And literally the boats there couldn't even get under the bridges because there wasn't enough clearance. So, I mean, I appreciate what they're doing there, but you know, it isn't the answer to the overall problem. They're just taking care of, you know, their immediate issue. Very interesting movie though.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your thoughts
Yeah,
on that.
I love what you said, that with how you referenced the video with the Band-Aid approach. It's exactly it.
Kiyomi?
Hi, y'all. Yeah, what struck me is the buying property backwards, right? Like away from, you know, and gentrifying neighborhoods that weren't previously gentrified, and then the people having to suffer the consequences by paying the higher rents because they are renters and not owners. It is shocking to me that what was a rich people's problem becomes a poor people's problem really quickly. And I guess that's more of a comment than anything else.
Yeah, but it's definitely interesting that the effects that you don't think about initially with rising water. I mean, you think that, oh, the water will come in and that's the issue, but just the domino effect that has on so many other things is really interesting to think about, and an important issue to think of solutions to. Dory? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, well, there are a number of things, but I think the thing of just allowing the developers to build to build on that area, and then not having, like, a lot of it is from, if you want to say money, dark money. So not knowing that aspect of it.
Yeah, definitely interesting and surprising to hear how much money is coming from overseas where people aren't even necessarily living in those condos or those buildings. So obviously they're not seeing the direct effects of that necessarily. Anyone else have any initial thoughts? Yes, Debbie. Oh, you're muted, sorry. Oh, you're still muted, Debbie.
Okay. My daughter-in-law has a quote on her website to the effect that even though people are facing more and greater problems, they have the capacity to solve them. And that's like gives me solace, because otherwise, I mean, I was comforted to see that they have some means of shoring up these cities, but you know, like Larry says, it's temporary, but your choice is either trying to do something about it as much as you can in the one place at a time, or you know, packing up and facing the tornadoes in the Midwest or whatever it's going to be, you know. So
yeah, it doesn't seem like there's one perfect solution that, you know, will fit everything and will result in there not being lost to anyone. There's always going to be some loss associated with sort of any practice that people take up. Anyone else? Yes, Bunny. Oh, you're muted. There you go.
Hi, I wonder how is California doing
Okay.
anything about their,
Okay,
Sorry.
sorry, I'm unmuted now. I have a lot of,
And Sunny. Sorry, I think that
you mean me,
confusing
Sunny
that.
Franklin, or
First Bunny, and then we'll hear from Sunny.
Bunny?
okay,
Sorry.
sorry about that. First of all, I have a lot of hope in our future generations in dealing with what Larry brought up. We have to deal with climate change. We have to find better ways, and I'm really hopeful that that will come, and I hope it doesn't come too late. I found the movie very interesting. The manner in which they're trying to save the city, how successful they'll be, I don't know. I think there may be other means of dealing with this problem as well, and that is dealing with climate change. And I really put my hope and faith in our future generations. I think the young people are so much more aware of what needs to be done.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sunny?
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you have any information about the California coast? I was reading some of the article briefly before you came on, and it showed how California coastline is being worn away, and all the walls that cannot, there's no more beach because of the walls trying to prevent. So is there any movement or consideration about our coastline? And maybe you'll show us something about that another time.
Yeah, we're actually, we wanted to hear everyone's thoughts on the movie, but we're definitely going to pivot to talk about California, and we'll
Yeah, like a perfect segue,
Yeah.
Sunny. That was just perfect to our next thing.
Yeah, so I think we'll pivot here, and then Larry, or if anyone else who has thoughts, please
Yeah.
type them in the chat.
Just real quickly to put it in perspective, NASA says that in the next century, the oceans will rise 12 inches, a foot. And there's already islands in the Marshall Islands where they're having to consider moving off the island because they have no way to mitigate the problem and go to the whole society needs to move to other islands because of the rising sea level.
Yes, Jerry, let's hear from you, and then we'll move on to the
An engineer. Very
yeah.
lucky to have this.
Well, I see, two conditions here, and one is that you have an actual problem that for the people that have been living there for many years, and you have to do something about that. But what disturbs me is the subject of greed. Is with all we know what's going to happen in the future, and yet these people have their eyes closed because they want to make money. And they don't care what happens in 20 or 30 years. That's going to be someone else's problem. And whoops, oh man, something just dropped. That's what's really disturbing to me. You have to take care of the problem that exists. You have to protect the people that are there and have been living there for many, many years. But in order to charge in taxes for protecting the people that are buying now and in the future, I don't think this is right.
Yep, exactly. I think that there's certainly the issue of short-term focus rather than sort of the long-term, long-haul issues, and that really connects to what's happening in California right now. So if anyone would just like to raise their hand, we just want to gauge how many people have maybe taken a look at the article or have read it before. Obviously not a pop quiz. We're just curious about where people are at. Okay, so a good number of people. All right, so we're going to just do a quick sort of recap of the main themes, the main points of Rosanna Xia's article. It's actually a Pulitzer finalist article. She was, a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Incredible article, beautifully written, great information, very powerful photos too that we'll be showing you some of. So I really recommend that if you haven't read through the full thing, that you do that at some point. And we're just going to do.
So we're going to share some brief overview information about the article, and then we can discuss it.
Yeah,
and
we'd
discuss
love to
California.
continue the conversation and also tie that back to the movie.
So in Xia's article, she explains how the California sea has risen almost 9 inches in the last 100 years. And in the next 100 years, it could be more than 9 feet.
Yeah, so there are different numbers when it comes to how much the sea level is rising, given that this is such a new problem. There are some numbers, like I think Miami said it could be about 6 feet, and there's also information that it could be 12 inches. It's pretty unclear across the board what that actual number will be, but this is one of those estimates.
Is she saying that that's attributed to global warming as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the rising seas have significant consequences on California properties, on infrastructure, on the economy, and on the environment. So cities like San Diego, Imperial Beach, San Francisco, and Malibu are among many more are threatened by the rising seas, which have been destroying homes and beaches and businesses. More than $150 billion in property would be at risk of flooding from the rising seas by 2100. And that's not even taking into account the storms or catastrophic events. That is just flooding. So in an attempt to combat these rising sea levels, which, as you said, Linda, is by global warming, California has instituted a number of strategies, the main three being building seawalls, adding sand to beaches, and managed retreat. So we're going to go through those three strategies.
Yeah, just briefly to give an overview, but as you saw in the movie, these are very similar to what Miami is employing. So I think it's interesting that across the whole country, these are very similar challenges and very similar sort of proposed solutions. So here, there we go. Here are just some photos. This is of the Embarcadero in San Francisco. This is just during high tides. It's not after a storm or a unique event. This is just normal high tides flooding. And here's an image of what used to be an apartment building that was washed into the sea. As you can see, this is the normal sea level now. It's not like this is during a storm or a tsunami or anything like that. And obviously developers didn't build on the actual ocean, but that's where the sea has come up to at this point. So the go-to defense in California is seawalls. So seawalls are very expensive, and that's sort of the main cost. They can cost up to $200,000 to protect just one property, and they need repairs, and repairs can cost just as much. So a mile-long wall could cost taxpayers up to $10 million, in the $10 million actually. It's incredibly expensive. And building along the entire state would cost about $22 billion in the next 20 years. And so this money is usually coming from taxpayers. It's not, individuals aren't usually putting up the money to build these seawalls. The benefits of seawalls, including obviously protecting homes and infrastructure in the short term, but in addition to that cost of just monetarily, how much these seawalls cost, they unfortunately destroy the beach. So when you build a seawall, as you can see from the diagram on the right, the water will eventually come up to that seawall, and in doing so, it erodes all of the beach in front of it. So you're left with maybe a little sand behind it, sometimes no sand behind it, if the seawalls have been built sort of at the edge of the beach, but it completely destroys the beach. Now, that destroys it for people. You can't go to the beach if there's no beach, and it also destroys the local ecosystem. So there are a lot of animals that will make these beaches their homes, including birds. Birds are at significant risk of dying and of certain populations even of going extinct because of these seawalls that have destroyed their habitats.
So in order to cope with the loss of sand from beaches, cities like Los Angeles and Del Mar and San Diego have been adding sand, which is a term that's used, beach nourishment. Rosanna Xia in her article says, imagine a river of sand moving parallel to the shore from Malibu to Santa Monica to Manhattan Beach until the ocean pulls it offshore. This sand is always on the move, flowing down from mountain streams and waterways and stopping only temporarily on any specific beach. So the cost of adding sand is quite expensive. In 2001, San Diego, for example, cost taxpayers $17.5 million to add sand to their beaches. But this wasn't a long-term fix. Actually, in less than a year, the extra sand was gone. So it cost taxpayers $17.5 million for only 1 year of added sand. And then San Diego tried again later, and it cost taxpayers this time twice as much, and the results were similar. To add sand to a stretch of beach in Malibu, where the sand has completely eroded, would be about $65 million for taxpayers. And Rosanna Xia explains that the reason sand is so expensive is because it is the most exploited and consumed natural resource in the world after fresh water.
That was really surprising for us to hear.
Yeah, I would not think of sand like that because it just doesn't feel like that.
Feels like there's a lot of sand.
Yeah, but it really is the almost the most exploited resource. Yeah.
So the final strategy that California has been employing is managed retreat. And we heard a little bit about this in the movie, although I don't think they called it managed retreat. I just think they said retreat. But managed retreat is defined as moving back, relocating, essentially ceding the land to nature. And here's an image. This is just a image or a GIF of a stretch of the PCH where houses have basically been falling off the cliffs into the ocean because of the rising water and the erosion. So the costs of managed retreat are costs of moving properties and infrastructure, or costs of buying out properties, which can certainly be problematic in Malibu, for example, where a single property could cost upwards of tens, even hundreds of millions of dollars. The costs also include lost value to homes from property tax, which they also discussed in Sinking Cities, Miami, and generally the cost of cleaning up homes and other infrastructure that have fallen into the sea. But as you can see from this image here, the benefits are that the beach stays intact. You save the beaches by doing managed retreat. This is an image from, I think this is near, Hearst Castle, I believe. And this is an image of an area that actually did employ managed retreat. So they spent $57 million. They moved a stretch of the highway and 3 buildings inland. And as you can see, this took a significant amount of time to work out all the details. And that's one of sort of the struggles that is happening in communities. Is managed retreat is a very controversial tactic. But as you can see, the beaches, after that managed retreat was done and there were no seawalls built to try to protect those buildings and infrastructure, the beaches came back. And so did the elephant seals, which are now returning to the beaches every year. And they use it as a nursery, basically. They care for their pups and they mate. So this also draws in tourists, which is sort of a secondary effect, a secondary benefit of managed retreat, is that people will come back to the beaches. So obviously when the elephant seals aren't there, people are free to use the beach as they want. And when they are, it definitely draws a lot of people to seeing them. All right. So that was just a brief overview. Yeah.
Yeah, we know that was a ton of information really quickly to just go through basically what her article is about. So it's a lot to take in. We get that. You can continue putting questions in the chat or raise your hand if you have something.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions before we get into more of a discussion about the article? Any just questions about what she's talking about, the implications, anything like that? Seems like we're good. Okay. So we have a few questions. Our first question, just to get the conversation started, we're kind of wondering who grew up regularly going to the beach, or if anyone wants to speak to sort of the changes that they've noticed in the beach over time. Have you been going to the beach for a number of years and seen the beaches change at all?
I can say something.
Yeah, go for it.
That one time we all had Shabbat at the beach, and the high tide came, and it was at Zuma, and it came all the way up to the seawall, which is a very long spread to come up to. I can say that the water has changed over time.
Yeah, definitely. It is crazy to be on the beach and for it to feel like there's a tsunami, but it's just the normal tides. Anyone else want to speak to this? Bunny?
This isn't the beach, but there is a very dangerous area where the railway goes south towards San Diego. And I need to take the railroad down there, and I'm actually afraid to get on it because it is so close to the edge now. I don't know what, if anything, they have to do something. They have to move the track in. I haven't heard of anything being set up on it. I don't know if anybody here knows anything about it, but it's very perilous.
Yeah, I think that Xia's article mentions that exact stretch of the land where the water has just come up so close to the railroad that, you know, it's shocking how close that's come. And that's relatively, you know, a recent thing. It didn't happen overnight, and it certainly didn't happen. It certainly wasn't like that 50 years ago, or I don't know when the railroad was built exactly, but when the railroad was built, it was certainly built a lot more inland. And the truth is, it's just not that inland anymore. Would anyone else like to speak to their experiences at the beach, just in terms of that change? Do you want to speak to where we go?
Oh yeah, there's my dad's favorite beach actually is, what's it? It's Inez.
Yeah.
It's
Inez?
no. Oh, well, okay. Well, there's Paradise Cove.
There's a
He's
lot of
over here.
beaches.
There's Paradise Cove, and then there's another one which we go to, which I remember from childhood.
Near
And
Santa Barbara.
near Santa Barbara, and the Santa Barbara one, I remember we used to, even just in my lifetime, and I'm really young, we know. I remember going down to the beach and it feeling like there was a lot more sand and like more space to walk before you got to the water. And then more recently going back and you're like right at someone's outdoor shower. You were like right at their wall, and then rocks and then water. And it was just, even only being like 17 years old, a little shocking to see how much the water and the beach and the environment has changed. That's my experience.
Yeah. Kiyomi?
It's very similar to what Asher just shared. One of my best friends, I mean, quality problems. She owns a house on the beach in Malibu right next to Nobu, but there's like almost no place to sit at certain times because of the high tide, and there's caused a lot of erosion. So she's constantly repairing the building because of that. And I mean, eventually it will be washed away.
Yeah, I think I definitely noticed that just going down near Malibu and seeing all the houses and how their stilts are directly in the water at this point. And they certainly didn't start off like that, but now everything seems to just be closer to the ocean because it is actually. It's very surprising. So we want to sort of talk more about this idea of managed retreat. It's very polarizing in communities, especially in beach communities where people are directly affected by this. So we're just wondering what your thoughts are on this. And as you saw from the movie as well, managed retreat sort of was discussed there. So what comes to mind when you hear managed retreat? How do you feel about that? Yes, Dory.
I guess I'm okay about it because I think of the houses right there, right by the cliff, and you see them hanging after some storm, and it just seems very dangerous with them hanging, and then also people not having public places to go to the beach because everything's closed off.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Larry?
So, I mean, it's a big economic problem because at least where you showed, and I've been there, there are no houses around there at all. Those homes, I guess, were just bulldozed. But to me, retreat means moving back. In other words, moving to another home somewhere, assumably close by. Well, that means somebody's got to buy your property, and somebody has to have property for you to buy, in order to rebuild. And that's a huge economic issue. I can't see a lot of that happening without government subsidies.
Yeah, it certainly has a lot of consequences, definitely economically for people. Jennifer?
I just am so struck by loss, by just hearing in Miami the different people just speaking about it's a badge of honor, right? We'll fix this and we won't give an inch. The intensity of language like that, and how we as people cope with things we don't either want to accept or let go of. And so, I mean, I feel like Miami needs a chaplain. No, I mean, I feel like there's just such, each community, as Rosanna Xia remarked about how starting within a community and having the conversations about what they want to save and what's important, rather than here's all this data and facts, and how that just comes out of nowhere and can actually just create so many problems for people working through it together. because as you said, Larry, it's just such an economic issue. So who's going to pay for it?
Yeah, thank you. I think the loss is a big part of this issue. Loss of people's homes, loss of the economy, loss of infrastructure, loss of your home. I mean, losing a home is something in itself. So certainly
loss of the environment.
Yeah, loss of the environment. Kiyomi?
Yeah, a friend of mine in law school, he was from Florida, and his father had rebuilt their house like 3 times and wasn't moving. He was like, well, I guess we're just rebuilding again. But who pays for that? We all do, right? So yeah, like I don't have any words for it, but there is such a badge of honor in going through it and getting through it and then going through it again and getting through it. I don't know. I mean, there should be something considered like uninhabitable, right? Like we should probably as a community and a country determine what areas are uninhabitable for certain reasons and then build away from there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, the economic costs aren't just on the people who are buying or selling or having to move. It's on taxpayers in general. People who are paying for, the repairs, who are paying for the seawalls. We all contribute in some way if we're paying taxes in the state of California. So it's not just, I mean, it's certainly the effects are most easily seen on people who are living at the coast, but it's not just a coastal person living there's issue. It's all of our issue. Linda?
And hi, thanks for calling upon me. I'm wondering where would they relocate to? I mean, they're used to this environment of being on the beach. They have this beautiful home. We already saw where there's the retreat where homes have actually fallen into the ocean or down the cliff. So where are they going to retreat to? And at what point do you draw a line and say, you cannot build here?
Yeah, I think that's, I don't personally have an answer for that. I think that's what communities are trying to decide on their own. And certainly the article brings up a lot of people saying, at what point do we stop retreating? Where does the line end? So it certainly is a larger conversation that I think, like Kiyomi said, should happen statewide or nationally to determine like what those benchmarks are, because otherwise it's just confusing and it's hurtful to people to feel like I have to move, but maybe someone else doesn't. Ron?
Okay, I get that. So what about that? You have these retreat areas and I see the road being built further inland, but then there's nothing done with the retreat area. So what about adding vegetation? I mean, I don't know, in my naivety, I don't know if that could help, but I would think that would be some kind of absorption and barrier to help with the ocean sinking our land, having the water rise.
Yeah, I think that's sort of out of the scope of our knowledge and conversation here tonight, but definitely things to look into. And I think scientists are exactly doing that, figuring out what ways can we mitigate this while also, we have to solve a bigger issue, which is what's causing the sea levels to rise. It's climate change.
So what's taking them so long?
I wish I knew.
It's almost like, oh, I don't care because I won't be here then. But yeah. I care about my family, about my children and my grandchildren, and they're going to be growing up and this is going to be their problem. No, it should be the problem now that we need to solve now.
Exactly.
So the article is wonderful.
Just like what Jerry said, where you're like, why is this not happening? So why are people waiting? And because what Jerry said, people are putting profit over human life, profit over people. So there's some certain people who care more about profit than about people living today and future generations. And
yes,
that's
greed.
Yep.
100% greed.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you. Bron?
So living in a fire risk area, I know just how hard it's been to get insurance coverage since the Woolsey fire. And I know that's happened in places in your movie, about in Miami and insurance, I assume the same thing will happen to the beach areas too, and that gradually, insurance companies won't insure you and you'll get the lowest insurance. I just look at places like the Colony, say, I mean, isn't that right on the beach there? So maybe we need to build some walls to save some towns and communities up and down the coast, and try and, you know, move back from, you know, move the road back again. I mean, that's a fantastic area with the elephant seals near Hearst Castle. You know, I mean, maybe I would hate to see all the beaches go and build a big wall from the top to bottom, but, you know, maybe we need to be selective. But the cost of those walls is so huge. But there are a lot of very, very wealthy people living along this part of the coast. And then you go up north, and I don't know what people are going to do. What do you do if your house is taken away? You know, I mean, I can see why people are so emotional about it. But I don't know what the answer is, unless we fix global warming. That would be very nice.
Yeah, that'd be very nice indeed. Yeah, I hear you with the money aspect of it too. Just obviously people here are a little more privileged, especially if you're living in a multi-million-dollar house in Malibu. That you probably have more options when it comes to trying to deal with this, whereas people up north who are living in, you know, areas that aren't so wealthy don't necessarily have those options. We want to just hear from Jerry. Oh, Jerry, you're muted.
I'm not at all familiar with the managed retreat. And I don't know, you know, if there's, if the government has had any proposals for it, and you know, and how that would work. I do know that I don't have much concern, because I'm 86 years old, and I don't have to, I'm not going to have to face that problem. But it seems to me as though it would have to be publicly financed, you know, because people are going to be taking losses for their homes, and who they're going to sell it to. So you can't just pick up a nice home and move it like you do with smaller homes. And so I don't know if anybody has any information on public financing or on the subject at all.
Yeah, I think that because it's such a new sort of strategy, I think the article talks a little bit about a couple communities that have sort of tried to do managed retreat and have been, it's been controversial to say the least, and people have been sort of fired over even suggesting retreating. So it's certainly a new concept in California and a new issue that people are still thinking through. And I do, you know, as we've talked about, the financing is sort of the largest issue here. But I do think people don't necessarily think of the financing when it comes to seawalls or to the sand, because that is also coming from us. So it's more of a, where are we putting our money? Are we putting it into building seawalls and short-term solutions? Are we putting it into managed retreat? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everything like we did in the presentation, everything has a cost. So do we put that money into managed retreat, and then there's having to cope with the loss of homes and that? Or do we put the money into seawalls, and then you get to keep your home, but then there's no beach. All of your beach is gone. So then the public doesn't have a beach, ecosystems are destroyed. It's really a, where are we going to put the loss and the cost?
Yeah, Larry.
So just to kind of continue on with what Ron said, and that is, I just read a report last week about the insurance industry in Florida. Insurance rates have gone up 300 to 400% there. And in some cases, insurance companies aren't even writing insurance anymore. Flood type insurance is what that is for hurricanes. And it may be self-fulfilling in the sense that the managed retreat may be a forced retreat because people won't have the money to rebuild their homes.
Yeah, and that's also been an issue in places that are like on floodplains. So speaking to the questions just about who's going to finance this, and especially with the insurance, the government, the national government, actually controls flooding insurance. So, and this, I'm talking about floodplains, not like sea levels rising, but there has been the issue of insurance companies refusing to insure people for floods. So some of that burden has shifted to the federal government when it comes to like river flooding. But obviously they did not necessarily anticipate that that would also be an issue on coastal communities just from the ocean itself. So we haven't really got that far in terms of figuring that out. Maxine, do you have a hand up?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I would like to also, from the discussion that we are talking about, it looks like the beaches are not for us. We can't live at the beach, from what we're saying. The way you want to look at a beach, get on an airplane and look at the beach. It's not for us to live there, or we should face reality. That's all I want to say. Face reality.
Thank you for sharing, Maxine. Exactly. If we continue to build or build walls and destroy the beach and lose the beach, then yeah, there won't be a beach for anyone. So we have to reckon with, if we want a beach in the future, there are some solutions that we just need to accept. I think was it Larry? You were saying how what was it? Just there's exactly to your point. A San Francisco advisor was saying that basically it's to quote him, he said it's either planned or unplanned retreat, but one way or another, we're going to have to do something. So what you're saying with insurance, just not writing insurance checks, people will have to move. So it is either planned or it's unplanned. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all of your thoughts on, Shell, do you have something to say? Were you raising your hand there? Oh, you're on mute.
I think it's time to seek out another planet that is inhabitable without water. Seriously though, I mean, it's inevitable. The coastline is inevitably going to be deteriorating every year. The problem is global warming. That seems to me the most important situation that we could face. There has to be some way of dealing with that. But the coastline is going to change, and it is inevitable. So the only thing that science fiction teaches us is to build high. As high as you can probably build if you want to inhabit this planet any further. But I think that's the initial problem that we have to deal with.
Jennifer?
Yeah, I mean, Maxine, I love how radical you are, right? Radical acceptance, which is to say this is what we have here. And man, reading this article, I never thought about the Port of Los Angeles, which will be not only with rising tides, just facing issues with storms, but just generally. And when you think about how many billions of dollars comes through the Port of Los Angeles and how that affects the economy of the entire country, that exactly just trying to put these Band-Aid seawalls and even, where we can do managed retreat still doesn't get exactly, as you say, Shell, at the underlying issue, which is global warming, and what we need to ultimately come, be working at the same time. So the ocean is warming off the coast of California and faster than anywhere else. And that's something that the more that we can, do towards that, resolving that, that ultimately I think is where we need to put our energy. There isn't another planet, Shell. I'm sorry. We gotta figure out our problem here. We can't just kick it down the road to another planet. We gotta work at it here.
As long as there's music on it, we're okay.
I do think that what you're speaking to is this sort of strange and tragic dichotomy, which is that yes, on the earth we live off of water. That's how life was born. It's how we sustain life. And yet at the same time, water seems to be one of our biggest threats, or sort of a symptom of the biggest threat. And it's sort of the same thing with these beaches. Beaches are what make California, California. If you talk to anyone who's not from the state, that's what they think of. They think of the mild weather and they think of the beautiful beaches. And yet this is also what is our biggest problem. So it's a crazy sort of dichotomy of issues here. Yes, Dory.
Well, I mean, I know we all agree it's the climate crisis that's the issue of the droughts, of the oceans, of the rising of the seas, the wildfires, the flooding, the hurricanes. That's the issue that we have to deal with, the climate crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to speak to what Kiyomi said in the chat, before we deal with climate change, we have to convince a significant amount of the population to believe in it. There's actually a statistic, and it was published, it's a UN survey, and it found that 2/3 of the population think climate change is an emergency, which is actually a significant amount. 2/3 of the population, a lot of people, except that there's in that 1/3 that doesn't accept climate change, people who have a lot of power, unfortunately, in continuing this issue, people who are policymakers and people who have a lot of money and pressure on industries and on certain governments where we aren't seeing that kind of change. So yeah, there's convincing that needs to be done in certain areas and towards certain people.
Yeah, and certainly from the movie, we saw that it's not necessarily even that people don't believe in it, it's just that they don't care. You know, these developers who are buying up land and developing it, they just want to turn a profit. So it's really not in their best interest, economically speaking, to say, you know what, climate change is real and the waters are rising, let's fix this, because they're not going to make profit off of fixing that issue. They're going to make profit off of turning a profit and selling land. So certainly the people, like Asher was saying, who need to be convinced or who need to sort of change their actions are the people who are who have the most power in making these decisions that affect us all.
Yeah. Dory?
Well, I was thinking of finding the developers, not just peanuts, but really finding them millions, billions of dollars. Maybe that might put a little pressure.
Yeah, and it's hard too because the state itself wants those developers, right? I mean, the state gets money from there being expensive properties and property taxes, and the state wants to have, you know, a great economy. Yeah, and it doesn't really work towards that end if we're actually taking stock of what issues we have going on and trying to approach them in a practical way. So it seems like it's an issue on a couple of sides, you know, the state, the developers, and then obviously people who are buying up those properties, as they were talking about in the documentary. It's not like no one's buying the properties, people still have very high demand. And so it seems like there are a lot of people who are just sort of ignoring the issue and like Jennifer said, kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, Joanne and Alan say, how can we stop the developers? Do we need more real estate building laws? Anyone kind of speak to that too? Sure. Yeah, Dory.
Well, I would say more regulations, stronger building laws, codes, I would say following the money of the builders giving money to the planning commissions. I mean, it's all these different things to do.
Yeah, certainly an issue with a lot of sort of different sides to it. Yeah, Jennifer, do you want to say what you put in chat? I think that's important.
Oh, I'm so aware of this struggle where high property taxes, of course, are very helpful with paying for not only infrastructure, but with being able to afford when, for instance, there's king tides and you know you need to bring in road crews to clear the sand in the morning so everybody can get to work. And in Xia's article, she speaks about Imperial Beach, which is mainly a working class neighborhood. They don't have high property values. They don't even have like a park service. They're just very restrained financially in that way. And one person speaks about they finally got a developer to make this beautiful hotel, and that this the community was very excited and wanted this because they knew that would bring income into their community to help, including help them cope with, the different challenges of the storms and things like that. So it's the, I think that what we continue to see, and it just seems like from both Miami and also the article about California, patchwork doesn't work. that because the way sand, I had no clue that sand is like a river that flows down along the coastline. So it doesn't actually work to just put a single seawall up and not have that affect everything around it. Or the limestone of Miami, makes for additional issues. And so having to have the will, the strength of will to be able to make change and institute regulations, which are going to be unpopular with many people, but to do it on a larger scale. And when they talk about a plan for a city over 50 years in Miami, no one's elected for 50 years. So I don't know how I just don't know how, people see through that in order to carry that kind of policy and regulation forward. And that the Coastal Commission was written in 1976, before any of this was an issue. And yet we're still doing everything according to those plans. So that's completely out of date. Just mind blowing.
Yeah, it does seem like it's sort of a confluence of, is that the right word? Confluence? Maybe it's not. A convergence, that's what I'm looking for. A convergence of a lot of different sort of issues in different spheres. We have the climate change issue, and then, as you were saying, we just have this issue of our political structure not necessarily being so long-term, in the sense that we don't have people that are held accountable 50 years from now. And at the same time, being very long-term, in that it's very hard to make changes once something is instituted. It's hard for laws to be changed. It's much easier to just write new ones. And so for these old planning commissions or these old blueprints of how to build on a certain land that really aren't up to date with the climate science, to try to rework that or to write a new law, or even to update an existing law, is certainly not an easy task. So it's, as I think we've talked about a lot, it's a lot of different, it's a lot of different issues that have to be fought in order to solve this. Yeah.
That's so interesting that our political structure is both too short term and also too long term at the same time. And that's just, I learned something.
Larry.
Not to belabor the economic issue, but I'm tired of having the economic problem put on the backs of taxpayers, property owners, individual property owners, to take care of problems that are really more global and macroeconomic. And at the rate we're going, that's what's going to happen. Do you want to pay for the Colony House in Malibu to build their seawall by raising our taxes? I don't.
Yeah, it's certainly more of a collective issue than I think it seems at first glance. And certainly the fact that this is a Californian issue. If you were living in a different state, you wouldn't, you'd probably be dealing with other issues associated with climate change, but you certainly wouldn't be paying for people's seawalls. So again, it's a political issue in addition to being sort of an environmental issue. And I don't have any answers. I don't think anyone has any answers for what is the thing to do right now. But having these conversations is so important because it gets us thinking, and it gets us, coming up with potential solutions, potential ways to mitigate these crises. And I think it reminds us that the big issue here is climate change, and that all of these fixes are Band-Aid fixes on a big issue that we're really not addressing in the way that we need to be right now. So I think we're actually just about out of time, but thank you again, everyone, so much for participating in this really lively discussion. I certainly really enjoyed myself. I think Asher did too.
Yeah.
It's great to hear from other voices. Asher and I certainly have these conversations a lot. So to bounce ideas and to hear what you guys are all thinking is really important to us and wonderful. So again, thank you. I know that not everyone was maybe able to speak or say everything they wanted to. So we really hope that you continue these conversations with family or friends or, in your own personal lives. Yeah.
Yeah, and we want to go back to the Passover Midrash story that we talked about at the beginning. So after Moses was told it's not time to pray, we're in a crisis, right? It's not time to pray, it's time to do something, to really act. One person stood up and took action. And some people might know about this because I think a lot of people know about the story, but Nachshon is his name. And he saw Pharaoh coming and he knew that he had to take action, and he listened and he said, I can't just pray at this moment. I need to do something. And he started walking into the Red Sea and he started doing something to change the crisis. And he was all the way to the water was at his nose. And then Moses raised his staff and the sea parted. So like Nachshon in our Jewish stories and our Jewish texts, we need to take action to make a positive change in the world. That's really, in this kind of crisis, we need to do.
And you're all doing here with us. So
yes,
thank you for that.
Thank you so much for joining us and supporting us.
You guys did such a fantastic job. You knew your subject material and you carried on a beautiful Zoom.
Well, thank you so
I
much.
gotta compliment you on that.
Jerry.
Yeah, ditto that, Jerry. This was really enjoyable. I enjoyed hearing the other conversations.
Mute? Did you mute me?
Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much. This was really wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great.
I really would like to get to know you guys a little better.
Thank you very much, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice night, everyone. If you
Nice to see you all. Talk to you all. Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Zach, for bringing the beach in.
You're welcome.
Good to see you today. Thank you,
It was
everyone.
good to see you.